¿Sí? Ya estoy streameando. Hola, hola, hola a todos. No sé si ya me están viendo ahí. Si me pueden decir si se escucha bien. Este, Bueno, y ahora vamos a esperar un ratito para que se conecten los miembros del jurado. Y tipo 11, supuestamente a las 11 en punto, en principio, arrancaría la defensa. Bueno, buenísimo. Gracias, Gustavo. Espectacular. Bueno, para los que necesiten también se puede entrar por Zoom a la llamada. Este es un link público, así que no hay problema. Esta es la Meeting ID. Y la contraseña es... No la puedo mostrar acá, así que la voy a pasar por el chat del... Acá, la paso. Video.
Maico,
Hi Dale, can you hear me well there?
I don't hear you.
There it is. I hope.
Okay, yes, I hear you now.
Yes. Nice to meet you again.
Well,
And Marianela with the camera.
Marianela,
Hi Mali.
welcome.
I am not going to show my face anymore, but I just want to say good luck. And I am throwing everything, I don't know.
Thanks very much, Mali.
Okay, so before I forget, let me set you as host if I remember how to do this.
And then I'll wait here for 15 minutes until all of you come back, right?
Well, that's so the jury is supposed to meet beforehand, and there's a 15-minute slot for a Zoom meeting for 15 minutes. I'll disconnect so I can connect to another link.
Okay, great. I'm the host now.
And then
so-
I guess we all come back here. Now, I
Okay.
thought I set this up to admit everyone who wants to come,
Yes,
but I had
that's true.
but
would-
I had to admit you two. It seemed.
Okay. So I will have to admit everyone that wants to join the meeting.
Which is annoying because you'll be
Right.
giving a presentation. Let me see here just a second. Invite.
Yes.
No, so I asked for it that way. Maybe I'm just not. Meeting settings.
Maybe I can set this up.
Yeah, maybe you can.
Preferences, admit everyone, something like that, right? Accessibility.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So now that you're host, you might be able to
do. Okay, I'll work on this.
Yeah, so check it out. So I set it up that way. I mean, there's a query.
Yes.
You can double check when I edit it.
I'm not really sure.
People need to have the right ID and passcode.
Yes,
waiting room.
I shared those that information with everyone. I hope.
Okay, so I've now changed it technically. I guess there was something called a waiting room.
Right.
So allow participants to join at any time. Yes.
Maybe search for this now. Admit
Okay.
everyone.
Let me
Zoom call.
drop. I'm going to leave and then rejoin just to check.
Yes. I will try to fix this. Otherwise, I will just admit everyone that wants to join the meeting.
Well, okay. I mean, that's the worst case. I'm going to leave and then try to join again. So I'll be.
Okay. Yes. Close tab, manage participants. participants. Where is that? Apparently there is a way to do this on a manage participants option somewhere. We ask the meeting host, but I don't see the button for managing participants. So I'm not sure. Close. Manage participants. Manage participants in the Zoom application. Schedule meeting. No. I can't hear you. I don't know if you're muted or something. Ah, okay. Ah, there you are, Dela. You're in both calls. Okay, yes. So I'll mute my mic.
Okay, I'm going to leave the meeting. I was able to join from another website without problems, so should be okay now. Okay, I'm going to, I'll leave now.
Okay.
And join this other thing.
Okay, yes, I'll wait for you here.
Yes, okay.
Okay.
See you later.
See you later.
When I ended, you were no longer, so you're muted at the moment.
So if you, I was saying that if you want me to, I can just come back at 11 o'clock.
Just a moment. But I have to make you a host. I'll make you a host.
But it told the app told me that I was the host. You're the host now.
Okay.
I can see that.
Now you're the host. Okay. Now I should be able to leave without problem.
Okay.
Okay. I'll give it another try.
Okay. Yes. Sure.
Yeah, I'm only leaving one person. That's me. Okay. So,
okay.
Now, during the time I'm away, anyone who wants to join, you should be able to. They should just join on their own, and you should be there. Okay.
Ah. Okay. So I don't have to admit them. Okay.
You should not. So let's just see if that works.
Okay.
See you in about 15 minutes. Ciao.
Okay. Great. Chao, chao. Así es. Acá estamos. Ya falta poquito. En 15 minutos se suman todos los miembros del jurado. Ese era mi supervisor, Dale Miller. Y en 15 minutos se suman todos los miembros de mi jurado y ya puedo arrancar con la defensa. Así que se juntan ahora, eligen el presidente del jurado y charlan, se ponen al tanto, no sé bien qué hacen, la verdad. Pero bueno, en 15 minutos más o menos estamos arrancando. ¡Yuhu!
Maico, are you there? Maico?
Yes, Beniamino, here I
Maico?
am. Yes,
Uh,
I'm back. How are you? Yes.
Listen, I'm meeting with someone with the jury in another link where you are not allowed.
Yes.
But if anyone by chance connects here, in particular Ugo Belan, tell
Yes.
him to connect to the other one. You receive the link.
Okay, yes, sure. I'll stay here and then let me know.
We'll come back in 10 minutes. I mean, we
Yes.
just have to decide who is the president.
Okay, great. Great. See you in a while.
How are you? Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
Because I muted the mic.
Okay.
There it is. nice to see you again, man.
How are you?
I'm doing fine. Just a bit a bit nervous, which is reasonable, I guess. There's Beniamino. You're muted, Beniamino. There it is.
Yeah, everyone is coming now.
Okay, great. And okay, so
Hello.
who's going to be the?
Hello, Michael.
Hi, Eduardo. Nice to meet you.
Same here.
Hi.
Hugo is going to be the president.
Ugo. Okay. Yes. Ciao, Damiano.
Ciao.
Ciao. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Very well. And Daily's. Oh no, Daily's muted.
Yeah, Dale is muted. I don't know. He's talking maybe to someone else.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, Michael, I'm listed as someone as the host.
You're also listed
So-
as the host.
I think I'm listed now as the host. So I'll make you host again so you can share.
Okay.
Hopefully that's all we need to do.
But the share screen is enabled anyway, so
Okay.
yes. Mm-hmm. Bonjour, Hugo. Hi. And Simona, nice to meet
Oh,
you, Simona. Hi. I think you're muted, maybe? Yes.
Oh, hi,
Hi, Hugo. Nice to meet you.
nice to meet you.
Okay,
Yes.
now
Ciao,
I
Simona.
know. Ciao.
Hi. Mhm.
So we are waiting a few minutes more.
Okay. Yes.
There will be an audience, or we are the only one. Oh.
Sorry, I didn't
There,
catch you there. Sorry. What did you say?
there will be audience or
Yes. So this is a public link. I don't know if
public.
anybody is joining us, but
Mhm.
I sent this to different lists, mailing list.
Delia says that she cannot enter. I don't
No?
know. Ah,
Does she
now
have?
she's.
Ah,
She's here.
Delia's there. Okay.
Hi, Maico.
Hi, Delia. How are you?
¿Cómo estás?
Muy bien, muy bien. Gracias. ¿Y vos?
¿Todo bien?
Bueno. So I think we're all here, aren't we?
Ya. Hugo, Simona.
So you went back. You went in Argentina for the COVID period.
Yes, that's right. And I haven't been to Paris since, so it's been a long time actually. Yes, that is like 15 months now. I remember I was supposed to come back to Paris like in May, because I was in Argentina in March, and then it just never happened. And yeah.
And how is the situation in Argentina?
So actually we're going through a peak in
Oh.
the in cases, infection cases, because well it's winter here. Winter is coming, and so yeah. But during the summer it was we did quite well actually. Of course, relatively speaking, right? But yeah, how are things going? How are things doing in Europe, in Italy, in France?
Yeah, always the same.
Yeah, imagine.
I think Michael was also unlucky. He got the COVID, right? You were positive at some
I
point.
did get the COVID actually, yes, and it was like 2 or 3 weeks before the deadline, which
Oh,
was quite challenging. So I had to keep writing the manuscript um, during those challenging
yeah.
2 weeks, couple of weeks.
It was heavy?
No, not so much. Some relatives of mine did suffer a bit from it, um, but no, I didn't. I didn't suffer so much. I had body pains and a bit of
Yes.
fever, maybe cough, but not that heavy, fortunately. Yes.
Now I had a half of vaccination.
Uh-huh.
Yes, just one half, but
Oh. Oh, yes, and I mean, I think that even with the first vaccination, you get like an important percentage
yes,
of.
there is you are not completely but partially protected. They say my doctor says 60-70%, which is a
Yes,
good level of protection. Yes.
yes, I heard the same number actually, and yeah.
Yes.
And so I understand, Hugo, you are the president of the jury.
This is what I understood also.
Yeah.
I've been forced.
Yes.
So the usage is to start in time, or we wait a
Yes,
bit.
I can start whenever you
In 2
you think
minutes.
it's time to start. I
Mhm.
mean, I have everything
But
ready here.
Maybe we can wait 1 or 2 minutes in case
Right.
there is someone else connecting to the link.
Yes, with a little delay. Yes. Fortunately, it's the end of the week anyway, right? So.
Did you invite your family, Maico,
Yes,
to the
they are
reference?
on the other room actually, in the other room, on the other side of
Okay.
the wall. Yes, and they are listening. I'm streaming this video. Yes, this defense.
Oh.
Yeah,
You have
and
two connections. No?
that's why they are not here in this call anyway. Hi Lutz, I know you're there, and also Victor Ariel. I don't think we've met, but also Kostev. It's nice to see you here.
Victor, I guess it's Victor Arial that he's working now with me.
Ah, okay. Okay.
So I think you can put your slides then.
Yes, I can share the screen and yeah, maybe share the screen.
Yes.
There you should see it.
Perfectly.
Yes. I don't know if the only thing you see here is my slides. Do you only see my slides, or do you see any Zoom
No.
pop-up windows or this?
Slides.
Okay.
Wait, yes. This full screen.
Yes, perfect.
And I think everyone can choose the display of.
Yes.
Okay, so there is no reason to wait, I suppose.
Okay. Shall I start maybe?
So then, yes, Maico, you have 45 minutes to present your work, and then we'll ask questions.
Okay, let me just set a stopwatch so that I can keep track of time. Well, okay, so let's begin. My thesis is called Dissecting Call by Need by Customizing Multi-Type Systems. And before we get into deep technical details, I first wanted to give you an idea of what my thesis is about. Originally, I wanted to contribute to the theoretical foundations for the call by need lambda calculus when it gets extended towards the strong reduction setting. And in particular, I was interested in merging different tools, connecting them at the quantitative level in an attempt to get meaningful insights about strong reduction in the call by need lambda calculus. Said tools are the linear substitution calculus, providing us with the required sharing mechanism for implementing call by need, and multi-type systems that will allow us to quantitatively characterize normalization in the different evaluation strategies that I cover in my work. What does this all mean? So the general recipe that I apply to each of my case studies goes roughly as follows. Given a certain case study, an evaluation strategy arrow, and a multi-type system T, the idea is that I prove that the existence of a reduction sequence D from a term U to its arrow normal form S is equivalent to the existence of a type derivation phi for U in the multi-type system T. This is what I mean by characterizing normalization. And moreover, the quantitative part states that some quantitative information in phi is an upper bound to the reduction steps in the reduction sequence D and the normal form S. So we provide upper bounds, and I also isolated a class of type derivations in each of the multi-type systems that provide exact upper bounds, or simply exact bounds. So this is the recipe that I applied to each of the case studies. I'm going to get into, of course, further details later on, but the idea is that this is the kind of properties I prove for the type systems and the evaluation strategies. In terms of contributions, I believe there are three main contributions of my work. The first one being a multi-type system providing exact bounds for call by need. then an incremental and well-principled approach, arguably, to extending this previous item. And then finally, the first study of reasonability in a call-by-need setting. Okay, so, and in terms of case studies or multi-type systems and evaluation strategies, and in terms of and how they evolved in time, the idea is that we took a multi-type system for call by name from the literature, one for call by value from the literature as well, and derived a multi-type system for CB need, so call by need, restricted to a particular setting, with Giulio Guerrieri and Beniamino Accatoli. Then Beniamino and I extended this case study to cover the open call by need, which I'm going to explain properly in a minute. And in parallel, we also worked with Giulio and Beniamino on strong call by value, evaluation strategy, and multi-type system. And finally, Beniamino and I, but I would have to say mostly myself, worked on the useful open call by need evaluation strategy. So these are the four main case studies of my work that we're going to go over one by one now. So the first one is call by need. CB need is the weak and closed version of call by need, where we assume that terms are closed, they don't have free variables, and reduction doesn't enter bodies of lambda abstractions. And I actually took also call by name and call by value in this weak and closed setting, and analyzed all three evaluation strategies from the perspective of erasure and duplication. These two concepts correspond to the notion of these two concepts correspond to the reduction of arguments and in beta reduction, generally speaking. In particular, I realized that call by name implements a kind of, this is a slogan version of a slogan name for the erasure mechanism in call by name, which is CBN here represents weak and closed call by name. In call by name, it implements wise erasure because unneeded arguments are not reduced. But on the other hand, it performs silly duplication because needed arguments are reduced every time they are needed, which is a silly kind of duplication because it's inefficient. Dual to call by name, weak and closed call by value implements silly erasure and wise duplication. The idea here is that call by value always evaluates arguments, and so if an argument is not needed, it reduces it anyway, even affecting the normalization with respect to call by name, I mean, and so this is a kind of silly erasure mechanism. But on the other hand, we have wise duplication, meaning that needed arguments are only reduced once, and that's very important that this is an efficient trait of call by value. And with respect to erasure and duplication, we may say that call by need takes the best from both worlds because it performs wise erasure and needed arguments are not reduced, and wise duplication because needed arguments are indeed reduced and they are reduced only once. And all this operational analysis on these three evaluation strategies allowed us to derive the multi-type system for call by need. So this is why we analyze them from this perspective. So the linear substitution calculus is one of the tools I mentioned in one of the first slides, and it is a calculus with explicit substitutions. Explicit substitutions being first envisioned by De Bruijn in 1972, and then but they weren't called explicit substitutions back then. They were called they were terms with indices. But they evolved to the notion of explicit substitutions, and there are many calculi implementing explicit substitutions. In particular, the linear substitution calculus gets inspiration from the structural lambda calculus by Beniamino and Delia back to 2010 because it implements distance beta, which I'm going to explain precisely what this means in a minute. And also linear substitutions, which was inspired by the notion of partial substitutions by Robin Milner from his 2006 paper. And also, the linear substitution calculus can be seen as being isomorphic to linear logic proof nets at the operational level, which allows us to reason about erasure and duplication at the operational level without all the syntax bookkeeping burden that other calculi with explicit substitutions may have. So that's why we use the linear substitution calculus. The syntax is very simple. It's just variables, lambda abstractions, and applications, plus, this is the syntax for the lambda calculus, plus an extra, a fourth production in the syntax where terms may be appended with an explicit substitution. And we read this saying that x takes u. And this is not to be confused with meta-level substitution, as it appears in beta reduction. Here we see the contraction of a beta redex, and on the right we see these curly braces, which represent the fact that each occurrence of x gets simultaneously substituted with u in t. This is called meta-level substitution, and the linear substitution calculus decomposes this into multiplicative steps on one hand, where we perform distance beta because we have lambda abstraction and the argument, and they may be separated with finitely many explicit substitutions. And instead of performing the substitution per se, what we do is we append an explicit substitution here. So we delay the substitution until well, it's delayed. And so beta reduction gets decomposed into multiplicative and exponential root steps, where we see here that blue x is required to continue reduction, which is written in this, which is plugged in this evaluation context. I'm going to get to that in a minute. And we perform one single substitution at a time. So we only substitute this blue x occurrence in this term with t, and just one. That's why it's called linear substitution. And so this change in granularity allows us to go from a small step semantics in beta reduction to the micro step semantics using these notions of multiplicative and exponential steps. What we do, the starting point for call by need is the linear substitution calculus version of the weak and closed call by need as introduced by Beniamino, Paulo Barenbaum, and Damiano in 2014 in their Distilling Abstract Machines paper. This is the notion of evaluation context for call by need. Well, this is the one for call by name actually, which is then extended with this production where the fact that x is required to continue reduction triggers reduction inside an explicit substitution. This is E prime here, and that's the way in which we first reduce arguments that we've put in explicit substitutions via multiplicative step before actually substituting it. And this is the wise application mechanism in call by need. And the root steps, well, the multiplicative one is exactly the same as in the linear substitution calculus, but the exponential one only substitutes, as we can see here, lambda abstractions. Lambda abstractions in substitution context, which is from the previous slide, this S, capital S. These things are called answers, and they are this is the shape, the syntactic form of call by need, of weak and closed call by need normal forms. So this means that we only substitute normal forms. So we don't substitute reduction steps in arguments. We just substitute in the normal form when x is plugged in a call by need evaluation context. And as it is usual in the linear substitution calculus, the strategy call by need is defined by the contextual closure of the root steps by the evaluation context. This defines a multiplicative and exponential components of the strategy. Yes, so just to give you an idea of how erasure and application works in this version of call by need, where we take I to be the identity combinator. And so we have this term. We first reduce on the left of an application as we would in call by name. We contract this multiplicative redex. Then we perform distance beta here because you see there's an explicit substitution in the middle, resulting in rewriting to this. And then here, it's only here that we reduce the argument because it is needed to continue reduction. Here x, the result associated to x, the normal form associated to x is needed in order to continue reduction, and this is why we reduce this needed argument. And we see here a kind of hereditary exponential step because we need to substitute the identity for z in order to substitute then the identity, which it is here, for x. And finally, substituting it here because this substitution was required to continue reduction, or at least out of all explicit substitutions. But so this hereditary reduction finally gets to this point where we've created a multiplicative redex We perform this substitution, leading us to another exponential, hereditary exponential step. We substitute the identity here, and finally we reach the normal form. And as you can see here, the unneeded argument was never reduced, the one associated to y here in the original term. And the idea is that then this is the Wise erasure mechanism in call by need, while this is the Wise duplication mechanism. Okay, so this concludes call by need, and let's see a multi-type system for call by need now. Okay, so multi-types for call by need. Well, there's the notion of intersection type systems, which are a standard tool to study lambda calculi, introduced by Coppo and Dezzani Ciancaglini in 1978. And then Philippa Gardner introduced a not important variant of these types. And since then, which we call multitypes, by the way, multitypes for short, otherwise it would be non-idempotent intersection type systems, just multitype systems. And since then, they were applied to a variety of results, including in particular De Carvalho's pioneer seminar work on providing exact upper bounds from the size of a type derivation of the number of reduction steps to the normal form plus the size of the normal form. So it's the addition of both things. But this is an exact upper bound. And then this notion of exact upper bound gets split, and we get separate bounds for each of these notions of reduction steps and the size of the normal forms in Beniamino, Stefan, and Delia's paper, Tight Typings and Split Bounds. Moreover, for example, in this paper, linear head reduction, which is defined as having the components, the multiplicative and exponential components, they get separate bounds as well. So it's splitting the bounds in terms of the reduction steps and the normal form, plus splitting them, the bound for the reduction steps in all the kinds of reduction steps. This is one of the starting points for my thesis. And then also this paper by Delia, where she gives a multi-type system characterizing call by need, weak closed call by need, without providing exact upper bounds. But this is the starting point for the multi-type system for call by need. Before we actually see the type system, I just wanted to give you the general schema of how what's the recipe that I applied to each case study, to each type system, but more in detail than in the first slides. The idea is that in each of the type systems, we isolate a class of type derivations that provide exact bounds. In the call by need systems, this is called the tight type derivations. And then we prove two properties of the type systems: invariance, which is the usual subject reduction plus subject expansion properties, and we give a kind of quantitative version of this property invariance. And then I study the adequacy of the type systems, which is properly speaking the characterization of normalization and with respect to its evaluation strategy. So a term is typable if and only if it normalizes. Let me briefly sketch out how to prove this in a quantitative way. So for adequacy we need to prove correctness and completeness. In the base case for correctness is proving that tight type derivations for normal forms actually provide minimal indices, or so exact bounds. And the inductive case, oh, by the way, I forgot to say this, but correctness is proven by induction on the size of the type derivation. And and the inductive case is proving that typability gets preserved by reduction, which is as usual and a standard notion. And then the fact that the corresponding index corresponding to the actual reduction step that took place, be it a multiplicative or an exponential step, it gets decreased exactly by 1. And this allows us to get exact upper bounds from a type derivation. And then we prove the completeness part of adequacy, which is proven by, which means that a term normalizes if and only if, the fact that a term normalizes implies that the term is typable. And this is proven by induction on the length of the reduction sequence, the base case being normal forms, and we show that they are tightly typable. And then the inductive case is the subject expansion property, plus the quantitative aspect, which is proving that the corresponding index gets increased exactly by 1. So this is the general schema applied to all of the multi-type systems in my thesis. And okay, and so we want to derive a multi-type system for call by need, and the way to do that, we work together with Benjamin and Giulio in deriving a multi-type system for call by need, providing exact bounds by combining those for call by name and call by value from the literature. The first one being the Carvalho's presentation, multi-type presentation of a relational model induced by the call by name translation of the lambda calculus into linear logic. This is the translation, the call by name translation, and the idea here, the highlight here, the key point is that the bang operator goes only on the left of a lollipop arrow, not on the right, which affects the definition of types in the call by name system. And then Erard took this same idea, but adapted it to the call by value translation of the lambda calculus into linear logic, which looks like this. The bang operator appearing on both sides of the lollipop arrow, which means that, and the bang operator actually represents, well, it allows us to, the idea is that with the bang operator we get a multi-type, and so we need to define types as being multi-types on both sides. And so we derived the multi-type system for call by need in our paper Types by Need with Benjamin and Giulio, ISOP 2019. And the way we did that was, well, first we defined the notion of multi-types, which are finite collections of linear types. And so these notions are mutually inductively defined, and linear types are, well, we use the call by value translation here, as you can see, because it's multi-types on both sides. So it's either of this form or the norm constant, which is used to type normal forms. Another important multi-type or type in the multi-type system for call by need is the empty multi-type, which we denote bold 0, which has to be strongly restricted, as a matter of fact, in order to extract exact bounds from the multi-type system for call by need. And in terms of notation, we write that phi has final type judgment, this sequence here. And I wanted to show you here in particular that the indices here, M and E, that's where we decorate type judgments with indices, and this is where we get the exact upper bounds from. Multiplicative reduction steps and exponential reduction steps. These are supposed to be upper bounds, or that's what we prove. So there is a way of combining the multi-type system for call by need, a naive way of combining it. I'm not going to explain these typing rules. They are somewhat standard, I could say. But the point is that the first attempt was to have an erasure, a typing rule for typing erasable terms with the empty multi-type, which is the type of erasable terms, and then a duplication kind of typing rule where lambda abstractions are the only ones that can be duplicated. And yes, and but this doesn't work because we indeed have to restrict the empty multi-type, the use of the empty multi-type in this type system. And so this is the actual type system for call by need, where we see that there are garbage collection rules dedicated for garbage collection here, where you can see the presence of the 0 multi-type. And what I want you to remember from this slide is the fact that axioms count 1 for exponential steps. The second index is the exponential index, and that we have these two kinds of typing rules for typing applications. One for garbage collection morally, and the other one for, you could say, the standard one, except that n is different from the empty multi-type. And in both, we add 1 to the multiplicative index, as you can see. This is important because we're going to refine this for open call by need. And to give you an idea, the correctness theorem for call by need goes as follows. If you have a type derivation for t, phi, then we prove that there exists a reduction sequence in the call by need strategy where the multiplicative steps in D and the exponential steps in D are respectively upper bounded by the M index from the type derivation and the E index. And moreover, if the type derivation is tight, then the bounds are exact. This is the actual theorem for call by need. And the completeness one, called tight completeness for call by need, is proving that if a term normalizes in call by need, then we know that we can tightly type it with a type derivation whose final type judgment has indices as they appear here. So the multiplicative steps and the exponential steps in the reduction sequence, respectively. So this is the idea for the theorems. I'm not going to get into so much detail for the other systems. I just wanted to give you an idea for the most basic one I have in my thesis. Okay, so open call by need. The idea is attaining the strong setting. In order to do that, well, of course, this is the starting point, the usual assumption for functional programming languages like OCaml or Haskell, where reduction is weak and terms are closed. A first step in extending this setting is what we call the semi-open setting, where we remain weak, but terms may be open. We call it semi-open because once we reach a head normal form, we stop reduction. So T1, Tn may be divergent terms even, and still this is the overall term is a normal form. And instead of covering this quite relatively simple setting, we isolated the open setting where reduction is still weak and open, but we iterate the evaluation strategy, the same reduction, on arguments. I believe that this is a very important intermediate setting towards the strong setting. I'm going to give you a number of justifications for it. And finally, the strong setting, which is required for proof assistance, like Coq, for example. Proof assistance, especially those that implement dependent types, need to check for beta conversion. Well, strong reduction is, of course, reducing under lambda abstractions and also being open and iterated on arguments. So this is really just the most general setting. And so the key point here is these three blue settings that I cover in my thesis and for different evaluation strategies and their type systems. And actually, the open setting is not only relevant for call by need; it's also used. It's also relevant for call by value, as proven by Beniamino and Giulio in Open Call by Value, their paper from 2016. And strong reduction can even be defined as iterating open reduction under lambda abstractions, and this is what Grégoire and Leroy did in their paper 2002, where they give a call by value strong reduction relation, and they do so by iterating a kind of open reduction under lambda abstractions. And then Thibaut Balonsky, Pablo, Eduardo and Delia published their Foundations of Strong Call by Need as a strong calculus and evaluation strategy for call by need. And they didn't isolate open call by need, but I believe that this is an intermediate important setting to understand if you want to provide exact upper bounds from a multi-type system. And so this is what I studied in my work. And well, the strategy is based on the notion of needed variables, the open call by need strategy, which are free variables out of all lambda abstractions, which are just those discarding those that should be morally garbage collected. The notion of needed variables is central to open call by need. It's a very important notion, and another one is that normal forms are either abstractions or answers, as we saw in weak and closed call by need, but also they may be inner terms. And so these two categories of open call by need normal forms are disjoint, and they are pretty hard to characterize. As a matter of fact, I use predicates in my thesis, in my manuscript, to characterize them, and the proofs get really involved actually. So it's kind of tricky. And in particular, it's trickier than call by name and call by value when we switch to the open setting, because in open call by need, the notion of evaluation context and the notion of needed variables are defined mutually inductively. And this is the derivation rules for open call by need evaluation context. I colored in blue the sets of variables that are meant to represent the needed variables of an evaluation context. Here we see that P, for example, in this premise to this rule, P, the needed variables of P is the set of variables V, but then this gets updated in the conclusions, and so this is why they are defined mutually inductively. Okay, just to give you an idea. And so what about the multi-type system for call by need? Well, we take basically the same notion of multi and linear types, except that we used to have norm in the weak and closed setting, and now we have tight, which is actually two separate constants meant to characterize, to type abstractions or terms normalized into abstractions and terms normalized into inner terms. This idea was taken from type typings and split bounds. And now type judgments have a third index representing the size of the normal form, which we didn't have in the weak and closed setting because morally, because the size is trivial in the weak and closed setting. It's always lambda abstractions in substitution context, and so this is why we have it here, because it's relevant, and we provide exact bounds also for this index. But what about the typing rules? The idea is that we have to perform two changes to the multi-type system for weak and closed call by need to get one for open call by need, providing exact upper bounds. And the first change is splitting the axioms. So remember that in weak and closed call by need we had a single axiom, and each axiom counted one for exponential steps. The idea here in open call by need is that we only substitute lambda abstractions, not inner terms. I'm going to explain to you why this is so in a minute, but the idea is that we only substitute lambda abstractions, and that lambda abstractions cannot be typed with the inner constant, because that constant is meant to characterize, to type terms normalized into inner terms, and we said that these are disjoint categories of normal forms. So at the level of axioms, at the level of types, we know that if a variable occurrence is only typed with inner constants, then it's only then we know it's not going to take part in an exponential step. It's going to contribute to the size of the normal form, and this is what we see here. And instead, if there is another linear type in the multi-type of the axiom, then we know it's going to be substituted and it's not going to appear in the normal form. So we need to split the axioms. This is the first change, quite simple, I would say. And then a further one, a second change or adaptation that we had to make, which is typing persistent applications. So the idea is that we keep the other two typing rules for typing applications, but also we add this one, where if we have a term t on the left-hand side premise, only typed with with a multi-type of inners, and we know abstractions are not typed with the inner constant, and we have a type derivation for u, then we know that t applied to u is not going to create a multiplicative step, because t is going to be it's going to reduce to an inner term and not to a lambda abstraction. And so instead of adding 1 to the multiplicative index, we add 1 to the size of the result index, and that's it. This is the two changes to get a multi-type system for open call by need. Okay, and finally, our reasonable version of call by need, which I call useful open call by need. To understand what this strategy implements, let me briefly recall a few key concepts of the reasonability of time cost models for the lambda calculus. We know that the leftmost outermost reduction is the standard reduction relation of the lambda calculus. It is normalizing in the sense that if a term t beta reduces to its normal form u, let's say, then there is a reduction sequence performing only leftmost outermost steps from t to u. And so in that sense it's normalizing, it's a standard strategy of the lambda calculus, and we know that it can be simulated in random access machines or Turing machines for that matter, actually, with a polynomial overhead in time. This means that the lambda calculus is reasonable for time, and that we can define super polynomial complexity classes independently of the model of reference, be it the Turing machines, random access machines, or the lambda calculus. This paper by Beniamino and Hugo del Lago from 2014, this is where they prove it, and in particular it is required to implement useful sharing. Useful sharing is only consisting in only performing triggering substitutions only if they create a multiplicative step. Well, this is linear substitution calculus terminology, but the idea is that we only perform exponential steps if they contribute to the creation of a multiplicative step and hold back all other exponential step, so to speak, thus computing a kind of shared representation of the normal form. But this is a requirement for proving the reasonability of the of the leftmost outermost strategy. And we decomposed these requirements for a reasonable and strong call-by-need strategy, realizing that we have three requirements. The first one being performing linear substitutions, one substitution at a time, which we already saw, only substituting lambda abstractions, and finally only substituting in applied positions. And this is important because we substitute lambda abstractions in applied positions, we know that they are going to get an argument, and so that substitution will have created a multiplicative step. And we already saw that the weak and closed setting implements linear substitutions. This is CB-need, that with the first case study that we saw. Then open call-by-need, for example, implements linear substitutions and only substitutes lambda abstractions. This is the reason why we only substitute lambda abstractions. And finally, in the strong setting, we require all three. We have to implement all three requirements. And but instead of understanding applied positions in the strong setting, which is quite challenging, I decided to study the third requirement in the open setting, thus deriving the useful open call-by-need evaluation strategy. So, what is this strategy about? Well, first of all, it refines the notion of needed variables. It takes the notion of needed variables and refines it to understand which ones are applied and which ones are unapplied. And to give you an idea, well, this allows us to define useful and useless substitutions. We should only perform useful substitutions and not the useless ones. So this is a useful substitution, as we can see here, substituting I for x in x applied to y, because we've created this multiplicative regex that we see here. And this, of course, is not a useful substitution, and this is not part of the exponential component of the strategy, because substituting the identity for y in xy has not created any multiplicative step or regex. The point is that in call-by-need we perform hereditary reduction, which means that we need to substitute hereditary applied variable occurrences. As you can see here, the leftmost occurrence of z is not syntactically applied, but nonetheless this z is supposed to replace x in x applied to y. So this means that substituting the identity for z should be considered a useful step, even if it doesn't create a multiplicative regex right away, because it leads to the creation of a multiplicative regex. So this is a tricky point. And another very complication issue or tricky point of the definition is that in the usual linear substitution calculus, arguments may appear on the right of the explicit substitution. So here we see that we see the situation where z is not applied, x is not applied, and in fact this substitution of I for z and then for x should take place because x is applied to y. And so this doesn't allow us to reason by induction on the structure of terms. And in order to solve this little issue, what we did was switch to the split linear substitution calculus, where instead of studying terms or defining the strategy in terms of terms, we define it in terms of programs, where programs are terms and environments. This is a lambda term, not a linear substitution term. And environments are just sequences of explicit substitutions where t is also a lambda term. And in this sense, the generate example becomes this program, in which it is very simple and very local to see that x is applied. Okay. Remember this open evaluation context that I showed you before? parameterized by their set of needed variables? Well, in the useful open call by need setting, they become more involved. We first have to split the notion of evaluation context because morally, because multiplicative steps may take place in unapplied occurrences, where exponential steps should take place in applied occurrences. And so these two notions are different, and so we have these two notions of evaluation context, which are parameterized by their sets of unapplied and applied variables, colored in blue and red respectively. Just to show you the level of difficulty that we get when we switch to the useful open call by need strategy. But remarkably enough, at the level of the type system, it is very simple. The idea is that we only substitute lambda abstractions for variable occurrences in applied positions. And lambda abstractions appearing in applied positions, according to the shape of the typing rules of the multi-type system, can only be typed with a narrow type. This means that if a variable occurrence is typed with only tight constants, inert and abs in the multi-type of the axiom, then this variable occurrence is going to appear in the normal form and not take place in an exponential step. Just like we did for the open call by need system, except that we had inert here instead of tight. So we further refine it, so to speak. And conversely, if there's a narrow lollipop arrow type in the linear type in this multi-type, then we know it's going to take place in an exponential step. So this is just to put in contrast the idea, this is just to give you the idea that putting in contrast the multi-type system, how easy it is to get this new multi-type system providing exact bounds for useful reduction in the open call by need setting. That with respect to the operational aspect, which is really difficult and more involved. Okay, so let me briefly overview strong call by value before I finish. We adopted the value substitution calculus introduced by Beniamino and Luca Paolini in 2012. We then define a normalizing subrelation of the value substitution calculus, the strong call by value evaluation strategy, which plays an analogous role with respect to the value substitution calculus that the leftmost outermost reduction plays with respect to beta reduction. That's why it's normalizing for the value substitution calculus. And it is morally defined as the contextual closure of open call by value by strong evaluation context, for like giving a justification for understanding the open setting. In terms of the type system, we just slightly adapt the type system provided by Herrera for call by value to the strong setting. And then to get exact bounds, we adapted the unitary shrinkingness typing technique. For example, we took the one presented in tight typings and split bounds, which is applied to a call by name strategies or reduction relations, but we adapted it to the call by value setting. And so before I finish, just a minor remark, which is a big result, but it's just I will just explain it briefly because I only have a few minutes left. Now that we've covered all the different settings, we saw type system for weak and closed, for the weak and closed setting, for the open setting, and for the strong setting. I realized at the end of my thesis that there are some requirements for invariance that correspond that neatly factorize into these different settings, which is the fact that in the weak and closed setting there are no requirements for subject reduction and expansion. Instead, in the open setting, the type context must be tight or shrinking. It has to be minimal and restrict the use of the empty multi-type. But it's only the type context that needs to satisfy this requirement. While in the strong setting, both the type context and the right-hand side type of the final type judgment need to be tight, shrinking, or restricted somehow. And I believe that these requirements may be extended to other evaluation strategies, reduction relations, or any other properties that we want to characterize via multi-type system. So well, let me just finish. So for conclusions, operationally speaking, I aimed at understanding reasonability for strong reduction in call by need, especially by factorizing the requirements. We saw the call by need. We took the call by need strategy from the literature, but we analyzed it from the perspective of duplication and erasure, and we put it in contrast with call by name and call by value. I derived the open call by need evaluation strategy, which is based on needed variables. Then the useful open call by need, which refines the notion of needed variables to understand applied and unapplied occurrences. And unfortunately, I didn't reach the useful strong call by need strategy, which is a pity actually. But I believe I'm willing to claim that this strategy could be defined relatively easily by iterating useful open call by need under lambda abstractions. And then the strong call by value strategy and normalizing strategy for the value substitution calculus. And in terms of types, I derived adequate and invariant multi-type systems for each of the evaluation strategies. I isolated classes of type derivations providing exact bounds. I used the type constants technique to exactly count exponential steps in the different call by need evaluation strategies. I believe this to be the only technique that works for counting exponential steps in a useful call by need strategy, in useful call by need. There are also other counting techniques for exponential steps that we considered, but they just didn't work, and I think this is the only one that works as far as I know. And then finally, I factorized the requirements for invariance in each of the three settings: weak and closed, open, and strong. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Just exact time.
Yes.
Wonderful. So we are going to go to the questions. So I propose to follow a relatively standard protocol to start with a reviewer from the further from where the defense is. So assuming it's Paris.
Yes.
So Simona, is it okay to you start with your questions?
Okay, thank you. So first of all, I would like to give my compliments to Maico, since I appreciated very much his thesis. It's difficult to read, but is very interesting and very precise, and so thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Then I start my question with another thing. Thank you for answering already to a question I implicitly posed in my report. I was asking why the three multi-type systems are different in the shape of the types, but you gave me a correct answer referring this difference to the linear logic translation. And it's a pity that you did not put this explicitly in the thesis, since it is a nice observation.
I think I could add this thing to the final version.
Maybe your thesis is so long, maybe
yes.
I forgot to this observation. So thank you for answering correctly to this. I have just one criticism that I put also in my report, which is that some notions which are very important for the call by need study, which are the notion of needed variables, applied variables, inert terms. Really, they are not properties of variables or of terms, but they are properties of occurrences of variables.
Yes.
For example, a term can have an occurrence, the same term, the identity, can have an occurrence which is inert and another occurrence which is not inert. And the same for variable, in particular for the applied variable. And so the definition of these properties is captured in a precise way in the type system, since the type system allows to speak about occurrences. But when you try to give this definition on the language, using on the calculus, using the operational semantics, this is not so precise. And why you do not accept the fact that you can define correctly this notion just in the type system and then to translate this from the type system to the operational semantics. It's strange, this starting from the operational semantics, giving a imprecise definition.
Okay, yes. So first of all, I agree that they should be called occurrences, applied and unapplied occurrences instead of variables. I guess I call them variables because in a way unapplied and applied variables are just, well, both sets of an evaluation context. For example, they combined, they form the needed variables of the evaluation context, and the idea was to refine open call by need to get useful open call by need. Also from an operational point of view, it is true that from the type system perspective is much simpler. That could have been actually it was the starting intuition that Benjamin and I used to derive to derive the type system, but also to get the operational semantics. The thing is that I didn't really want to use the type system as the starting point, like derive the operational semantics from it. I guess I would have to say because we use the constants, and although the constants play a very an elegant role in their separation between useful and non-useful.
And define directly the notion of occurrences in the operational semantics. Is too difficult, too heavy?
To define the notion of occurrences.
Occurrences of the...
Well, actually, so occurrences, but you know that needed variables may have...
possible but difficult.
Yes, but you know that needed variables may have unapplied and applied occurrences. So the idea is that switching from needed variables to occurrences. I guess I defined the useful open call by need strategy in this way because I wanted to extend open call by need, but I think it's not, I mean, it shouldn't be more difficult than what I had to go through to define the useful open call by need operationally. So it could have been a possibility. I guess that the mindset I had was first the operational semantics for open call by need, and then the type system, and then operational semantics for useful, and then the type system.
For a presentation point of view, it's okay.
Yes, for a presentation point of view, but from a scientific point of view, I guess it could have been possible. I don't think I would have saved so much time anyway. I think all the intricacies and all the proofs would have been probably as difficult or as involved as the one I present in my thesis. I believe so, because actually I reformulated useful open call by need several times, going back and forth to the type system and the operational semantics and realizing that I had to change something and finally arriving at the final definition. And I think all the situations that you can see in the definition of the evaluation context are something that would appear even if I dropped the notion of needed variables and used the notion of occurrences and applied occurrences instead. But I think it's possible. I think it's definitely possible. So I guess it's a presentation. In the end, it's a presentation issue. Yeah.
Okay. Can I pose other two questions, please? So the first is about the models. Every type assignment system you present induces a model of the calculus, not in the same, not exactly with the same interpretation, it depends, but they induce a model. And I understand that your thesis here is a thesis much more interested in the syntactical side, operational side, not in the semantical one. I have this idea that maybe all these models are equivalent for the point of view of not for the call by value, but for the call by name and the call by need. My impression is that maybe these models are completely equivalent. But if you take your multi-system, multi-type system, sorry, in order to obtain a model, you need to forget the quantitative information. You forget the quantitative information and you characterize the interpretation of a term with the pair of context and types as usual, as for the, but your systems have a lot of information more than this. And I was wondering if it's possible to use this system in order to build not models of the calculus, but semi-models of the calculus. Plotkin in the 60s defined the semi-models as, for lambda calculus, as a model of lambda calculus which has not an interpretation which is invariant for the reduction, but an interpretation that increases during the reduction, since during the reduction the information about the behavior of the term is more and more precise.
Yes.
So maybe it's possible to start from your multi-type system in order to obtain semi-model. I did not know any literature about semi-model after Plotkin. Sorry.
Yes.
But I think if you take into account also the quantitative information of your system, you can build interesting example of such semi-models in which also the reduction behavior is taken into consideration. So my suggestion is to try to do this. Maybe at the moment in which Plotkin defined the semi-model, such a technique characterizing the reduction through type was not existent, so it was difficult. But this is just a suggestion, but I think it can be interesting, opening a new idea of what are the information a model can supply about a calculus. The last question is very, very general. This is a question, if just in the sense that, do you agree in this idea? Maybe you can have a look on this proposal. You use in your thesis the word complexity, speaking about the number of steps necessary to reach the normal form, while in the usual standard literature, the complexity is something very different, is the definition of different classes of in which to insert algorithm like polynomial p-time, p-space, and so on.
Yes,
and the two notions of complexity are in some sense orthogonal, since in the standard complexity, they speak about the complexity class of an algorithm, while you are in some sense considering a particular instance of an algorithm, and the complexity in the sense of studying the number of the time to calculate a particular instance of an algorithm. And in fact, the fact that the two notions are in some sense orthogonal is evident from the fact that the tools used for reasoning in one on the other are completely different, but for intersection types. Since intersection types has been used in your work, in your thesis, and in the related work in order to supply complexity in the sense of number of steps for reaching the normal, but in other context for defining in an implicit way, systems, complexity classes as p-time, np, p-space, and so on. So do you think it's possible to reason together about these two very different notions of complexity? why the complexity you propose, how can be inserted in the general notion of complexity in computer science? This is a very, very philosophical question, maybe.
Okay, sure. Yes, I accept the challenge. Okay, so the idea is that maybe if I used complexity, the word complexity in my manuscript, maybe I should replace it with quantities. This is why I stressed the word quantities in my presentation. Because what I extract with multi-type systems are quantities or time. The number of steps to the normal form, the size of the normal form, and so on. I guess that I studied those both notions of complexity, the quantities notion and the actual complexity definition, separately, in the sense that I study reasonability for call by need, which corresponds to a notion of complexity as it is traditionally in the literature, and then I study quantities. So the idea is that I think that I cover an evaluation strategy that is defined in terms of the general notion of complexity, the traditional one in the literature, the useful open call by need strategy. But then I studied the quantities for it. And the idea is that originally what I wanted to do is target the useful strong call by need strategy and a type system for it as well, of course, because what was appealing about it for me was the fact that the possibility of proving that not only is it efficient with respect to call by name, for example, but also it is complexity-wise, it is also proven to be reasonable. And so that was the original target. And if I ever or anyone ever got to derive a multi-type system for useful strong call by need, the idea is that we would have, in a sense, both things connected at the level of the type systems, because we would characterize a useful notion of evaluation strategy with the quantities associated to it. But I just didn't have the time. I guess you saw how long the manuscript is, and I really went through all the proofs and proved all the small cases and so on. But it took me a long time to cover up to the useful open call by need strategy and multi-type system, so I didn't have the time to arrive to this final point where both notions would be more justified and perhaps more connected in the same framework.
It's okay. My compliments again.
Okay.
I'm satisfied.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Simonetta. So we are going closer. If we can talk about being close, all being remote. But Damiano, would you be okay to ask your questions?
Yes, sure. Well, so yes, of course. First of all, I join Simona in congratulating you for this very nice work. Kind of an imposing thesis with, really very, remarkable results that are technically challenging, and you really go very far in the end. You say yes, that you didn't get, you didn't go all the way, but I think already what you covered is quite a bit. It's quite a lot.
Yes.
Yes. I guess so. I have basically two. Questions. Two groups of questions. Let's say. The first one is about. I guess it revolves around an observation that I wrote in my report about how surprised I was, in a sense, how far you went without having something that I would call a sort of a more unifying, view or understanding of these things. And I think, this is, of course, I don't have a way of saying this more clearly, more technically, so I'm not going to attempt what I mean by that, but to say what I mean by that. But But maybe so I want to concentrate on a technical aspect, which I think maybe could be the key to trying to understand at a more deeper level what's going on. And it's I don't know if we should call it affinity or affineness. I don't know, the fact of being affine anyway, in the sense of linear logic, so
Yes.
linear
yes,
affine.
affine logic. Yes.
So you do mention at the very beginning, at some point in, I don't know, one of the introductory chapters, the fact that call by need is related to affine linear logic.
Yes.
And when you mentioned, I think this is I don't remember who did this. There's I think one of the very first works on call by need, right? Where they define.
Oh yes, I think it's Marist and
yes.
another authors. Yes, proving that if the target of the translation is an affine calculus, then there's a way to characterize call by need. Yes, and that's where they put in contrast all these translations. As a matter of fact. The one for call by name, call by value. And
yes. And which, it's very, I mean, from your thesis, from what you say in your thesis, this becomes extremely clear. I mean, I don't know, or at least it's the fact that, you say, I mean, call by need, in the end, it's the fact that you want to be wise, both in, in erasure and duplication. And when you look at the encodings of the lambda calculus in linear logic, and you see, where the exponentials are placed, well, you see that in call by name, they are placed so that, you can do wise erasure. And in the call by value, they're placed so that you can do wise whatever duplication. I mean, the fact that and then you realize that if you want to do both, well, you just can't, because I mean, you can't in linear logic. I mean, that's the point.
Yes,
if you really
have
want
to switch to an affine setting. Yes.
Yeah, but then you realize, if I do call by value, but then I allow to erase something that shouldn't be erased because it's linear.
Yes.
Then I can get. But so that's I guess my first question is I don't know if you have ever tried to take this and really push it as far as possible, and see, I mean, what's really the relationship between linear logic and call by need.
So I think that if we translated the call by need lambda calculus into an affine logic, allowing restricting contraction but allowing weakening. I never really pushed it that far in that sense, in that direction. At some point, I remember with Beniamino, Giulio, and Thomas Erard, we wanted to. We considered this possibility of understanding this translation from a categorical point of view. But unfortunately, there's only so much you can do during a PhD in 3 years. But I was really interested actually in that idea. But then, what I did push all the way to the end was the idea of deriving multi-type systems and relating them to the evaluation strategies. That's the main idea, the core the main track I took until up to the end. And it's a pity I didn't have the time to actually analyze this kind of this possibility of translating into an affine logic and see how this maybe can be related to a multi-type system or to some kind of type system adapted to the notion of affine logic. I didn't consider it in depth, I can say that, but it's definitely an interesting perspective on the idea of translations. After all, this is the starting point for my weak and close call by need multi-type system, and what we didn't have at the beginning was the fact that there was no translation, and we decided, okay, but it would seem that it's possible to derive a multi-type system for call by need by combining those of call by name and call by value, and the naive combination didn't work, and we thought that this was already interesting enough that we had to restrict the use of the empty multi-type. And then I saw the possibility of obtaining an open call by need, useful open call by need with the notion of tight constants, and then I just took that way, I guess.
Yes. I mean, it's very interesting that you mentioned this, because my second remark was going to be precisely this. I mean, you see in the failure of the naive system, that there's something in there that has to do with weakening, and that there's something that has to be understood. I mean, I guess you understood it already because the system works. I mean, so you made it work. But my idea should be that these kinds of system should arise like completely automatically from from understanding how you embed the calculus in linear logic. This is you just pull back the translation and you get the system. And so my way of that's why I'm asking the question. My way of approaching the thing would have been, let's first waste a lot of time on understanding this thing, and then the rest will come completely naturally. But I mean, it's just I'm just saying.
Yes. No, but it's definitely an interesting perspective of the thing. Yes.
And so the second group of questions is the relationship with abstract machines.
Yes. I didn't say anything about that in the presentation, actually. And
yes. I mean, but I know that you know about it, so that's why I would like maybe you to expand a little bit. So the first thing is that now again a group of little questions about this. So the general idea, yes, is that I mean, we know that the linear substitution calculus is very, very strongly related to abstract machines, and that's a wonderful thing about it, that allows you to think about, to reason about machines without actually looking at the machines.
Yes.
But then when you do the open call by need, and especially in the useful open, you really use a calculus that starts looking like a machine,
yes.
Right? Because you start splitting again.
Yes.
So I wonder, yes, if you have in the end, where does that calculus come from? Is it really because maybe you thought first in terms of a machine and then you?
Yes, exactly. Yes, that's how it happened, actually. We were working with Bruno Barras and Beniamino on an abstract machine for useful strong call by need, and there at some point we realized it was just really, really involved. I guess at some point we like 20 kinds of transitions. They were all very involved, and yes, with different registers to keep track of hereditary appliedness of variables, occurrences, and so on. And I remember it was so involved that I wanted to go back to the rewriting theory level and understand what was going on there. You see, and especially cover isolate the open setting. So that's why I studied the useful for the open setting. But the original inspiration came from the study of abstract machines. And I remember we met with Beniamino and Bruno for weeks and months, and things kept getting more and more involved, actually. And we came up with this idea of the split linear substitution calculus, where we have these applied occurrences that can be checked locally, and by the way, the split linear substitution calculus allows us to understand applied and unapplied occurrences inductively on the structure of programs. That's also something interesting. And then, of course, the idea was to reach the useful strong call by need, the calculus or the strategy, the abstract machine, the type system. But then it just took me so many pages, so much time to prove all the required properties to know that we were doing things right. We wanted to know that we were doing things right. And in a sense, even though it's an awful lot of pages to prove the properties of the type system for useful open call by need, it's almost for free, because you just refine a little bit the axioms and you just get the type system. Proving it is of course it's very involved. You have to work with many intermediate lemmas and so on. But the system was so it felt like being a free system in a sense. That this is what I started working on before getting back to the abstract machine, and I just never had the time.
So I guess then my continuing on this line, do you think that if I understand correctly, the split LSC could be used right from the start? I mean, you could formulate everything in there, right? I mean, call by name, call by value. I mean, it's more general.
Yes.
So do you think that in a sense the split LSC is more fundamental than the LSC?
Well, it is more related to abstract machines, so it is more related to actual implementations in technological applications in that sense.
But it's more general, right? I mean, it's like
it
you
is
can
more
do
general.
more things with it.
Yeah, so I actually, one could say that the split linear substitution calculus is a kind of equivalence class between proofnets. In the taking the linear substitution calculus and then just working up to a certain structural equivalence that you saw in, yes. And so in that sense, it is more general. I guess it could have been the starting point for all the strategies, even the weak and closed ones. But
I mean, like a unified setting, because I think what your thesis maybe is missing a little bit is yes, like I mean, right from the start I said, like a unifying ideas, you know, overarching things, you know. So you know, maybe even if it's more complicated, maybe syntactically to introduce at the beginning, but maybe you know, like it would be. I mean, of course, the thesis is done; it's ready. I mean, I'm not saying that you should rewrite it.
No,
but
of course.
Just, you know, to have I know in the future, you know, to have like this.
Yes.
Maybe this idea.
I wonder if when you say unifying framework, you mean at the level of the types or the operational semantics?
Oh, both. Everything.
Both.
I mean,
okay.
I think, yeah. I mean, it's yes.
Okay, so at the operational level,
you start with the operational semantics. You start with that. I mean, but then you know, because I mean, if you have just one sort of calculus, I mean, this would be what's interesting about it. You said it. You know, it's that it's kind of, you know, goes towards the idea of proofnets, you know, and it's something that's it's very, very operational in the sense it's very close to machines too. You know, I mean, I like this split LSC, even though I haven't really. I mean, it's the first time I read about it in your thesis. I don't know much of it.
Yes.
I've never really used it. Maybe I don't know. Maybe it's a nightmare. So I don't know. But I don't know. I liked it as. You know,
I'm not sure. I think it's feasible. Definitely feasible. I guess if I had the time. But it would have to. This would imply rewriting all the proofs and so on. So it's.
No, yeah, of course.
I guess it's a matter of an issue of time, but I guess I don't know. I guess to me it seemed natural to formulate weak and closed strategies in the linear substitution calculus and only switch to the split linear substitution calculus for the useful open call by need case. And then, as I was already added, I just decided also to define the open call by need strategy in the split linear substitution calculus.
Yes,
but it is more, at least it is true that the weak and closed strategies defining the linear substitution calculus are more are more natural, closely related to the traditional, the standard definitions in the literature. So it's I guess it's justified also in that from that perspective. But it could be interesting to understand the split linear substitution calculus as the unifying framework for all the strategies, and yeah, I think it's a promising line of work, and because it's a kind of intermediate step between abstract machines and the linear substitution calculus, even a further intermediate step.
Okay, well, thanks again. I have no more questions. And so again, you know, just stop saying that you didn't do, you know, a lot, that you didn't have time. It's really, I mean, you did a lot already. So just they think, you know, like, you know, I did a lot, and you know, there was just too much to be done in 3 years. That's the way.
Yes, that's right. Well, okay, thank you. Yes, that's kind. Yes.
Okay, thanks, Damiano. Eduardo, are you okay to?
Yes, sure I am. I want to join, of course, Simona and Damiano in congratulating Maico. It's a really superb sort of work. There was a lot of technical material in there. I have a couple of questions. They're sort of kind of general questions, perhaps not so sort of detailed as the questions that Simona and Damiano posed, but I'll go ahead and shoot.
Yes.
So the first one is more of a general thing, and it's about this sort of this correspondence between your type derivations in these using these multi-types and the way they sort of capture sort of reduction of the terms they type.
Yes.
And so, I was just thinking, is there a way you could sort of relate those things? Is sort of, let me see, how can I pose this? Sort of, can you sort of relate more directly the derivations, as a reduction sequence? Let me say type derivations and reduction sequence sort of more directly. For example, one thing I was thinking of is, I don't know, recently Beniamino presented his work on this sort of the token-based sort of machine, sort of reformulated at the term level rather than using sort of proof nets. And I don't know, for example, the fact that when you run that machine on a term, whether sort of every time you visit one of these variables, whether that corresponds to one instance of a type or something that you might use, sort of try to sort of redecorate or reconstruct this sort of multi-set type derivation out of a run of this machine, for example. I don't know if that sort of, it's kind of vague, the question, but sort of try to relate, sort of try to scholemize, perhaps that's the word that comes to my mind, sort of the reduction sequence you're somehow capturing through your type derivation. I don't know if it makes sense.
So I don't know if you, well, it's not so appealing, I guess, but I don't know if you went through the proofs in the technical appendix of my work. They are super long. It's like 300 pages and so on. But the idea is that if you take a look at subject reduction, expansion, these kind of propositions, in order to prove these propositions, I actually perform a kind of cut elimination procedure. So I have to prove how to actually substitute the different variable occurrences. So I take axioms and substitute them for derivations for lambda abstractions, for example, and I actually do it in the proof using this type derivation. So in a sense, in order to get to preserve typability by reduction, for example, you actually have to perform the reduction at the level of the type derivation. I don't know if that's a good
yes,
point
I understand what you mean.
idea.
I understand what you mean. We've played with some of these ideas at some point with Pablo, for example. Sort of, it might be possible for the types, your multi-types, to actually be the terms themselves, or some sort of variation.
Yes. I discussed this with Pablo. I remember he told me this idea that so types. That types could be reduction sequences, for example, or
or the
normal form, for example.
Yes. The types could be terms themselves. So
right.
You type a term with a term, basically.
You type a term with a term.
In a given.
Yes, or for example, you type a term with its normal form, and
exactly. Well, that would be one of the instances of the type. A normal form would be one kind of type.
Yes.
I think that kind of makes sense. It's just a way of sort of perhaps expliciting, so to speak, the derivation which is inherent in that type derivation. The other thing is, perhaps this has already been done. With I don't know. I do not know sort of anything about game semantics and sort of the genesis of these token-based machines, but perhaps this is already implicit there, where the way you traverse sort of the graph and the way the token moves sort of corresponds in very sort of tightly to the derivation itself.
Right.
And so perhaps you can somehow sort of reconstruct those, all those in a multi-set, all the types, all the uses, perhaps they correspond to certain sort of virtual paths. I don't know what you might call them.
Virtual path.
I don't know. Just again, always behind this sort of general idea of sort of trying to make more explicit this the reduction sequence behind the type derivation, which of course you get from simulating your sort of normalization process, and yes. I think it's a general question, but
but definitely, I think definitely type derivations or type judgments could be decorated with, for example, the normal form of the term, and or reduction sequences, and I think in a sense there is more information that one could take from a type derivation and make it more explicit, while one keeps building the type derivation. That's for sure. but I don't know. I don't really know what else to say about this. I haven't really explored this idea in depth or properly.
No, but you've given me quite a bit more of sort of a feedback than
Okay.
information than I had before.
Yes,
So
actually, Paulo and I discussed these things sometimes actually, and he had the same intuitions. Maybe because he discussed them with you as well. And I
yes,
remember
yes, indeed.
I telling him that it's definitely possible, but then, well, I guess I just didn't have the time,
Yeah,
or it's just another
he's
line of
really
research,
keen
but
on that.
it's definitely promising. Extracting more information from the type derivations, yes.
And then the other thing the other thing is more of a silly thing, but I don't even know if it helps in any way. But in this this upcoming edition of FSCD, so Tibor Balabonsky, he has this paper on strong call by need. It's interesting work. It sort of builds on the prior work we did with with Delia and Pablo and Thibaut as well.
Yes.
So one thing I like about that paper is that he sort of first he revisits sort of strong call by need, but there's no explicit notion of context, because the contexts are sort of built into the reduction rules. This is kind of interesting. I think it's more of a technical device than a sort of a profound it changes. Perhaps it helps to revisit calculi that revolve around the notion of strong sort of reduction, and where you need to define. You've seen this. I mean, your work. It's obvious that the complexities behind working with these sort of inert terms, or with these sort of right?
You call
variables that are
structures,
sort of persistent because they're never replaced, and we call them frozen. But yeah, it's exactly that same thing. So I don't know. I'm just saying that it might help from a technical point of view. I'm not sure to perhaps take that approach, where sort of the reduction concepts are sort of built into the evaluation rules. They're not defined anywhere. There's no explicit definition of a reduction context with all those indices below, and it's kind of a neat presentation, I thought.
So it's
anyway,
yes, I think it's a really interesting.
Might want to look at that.
It's a really interesting result, and actually, I would like to see how that could be applied to the useful open call by need strategy, whose evaluation contexts are just so complicated, so involved. There are these two kinds, so many rules. I would like to see how this translates to the useful open call by need strategy, because maybe it simplifies things
nice because
considerably.
Indeed. All I know is that when they have the case for the explicit substitution and they have to go into the right, typically what you do is you make sure that the sort of you have a head variable, the target variable is a head variable in the term on the left. And that the fact whether the variable is actually at the head is determined by a reduction that actually does nothing. It turns into a predicate to check whether that variable is the head or not.
So doing nothing is like a frozen variable or an inner.
Doing nothing, it just involves basically just checking whether that variable is. So anyway,
maybe this also.
And then perhaps.
No, maybe this also can be related to abstract machines and how checking a variable is inert or not, and what appears in the environment and so on. Maybe this has also.
It could be. I have no idea.
Okay.
I truly have no idea. The last thing I might ask is more of a silly question. At some point in time, when we looked at that strong strategy, the first thing we thought was, okay, if we're going to move towards perhaps thinking about an abstract machine involving sort of Galena or some kind of core sort of language behind Coq, we'd need to perhaps introduce these what Xavier Ledoux calls inductive types. That's what he calls it in his paper, right? Where they basically have constructors and then a sort of a matching, pattern matching on constructors, which can fail or not, and so you have other sort of problems there. I wonder whether you've thought about this, or perhaps in your work with your prior work with Bruno Barras, or about how this behaves. This construct, pattern matching, and having constructors in your extensions, in your languages.
No, we didn't really consider it, actually. I remember that working with Bruno, he wanted to prove that the strong reduction kind of abstract machine implemented in the core of Coq was actually useful, and and that it could be proven in the sense of distilling abstract machines, the paper by Pablo, Damiano, and Beniamino, proven that it actually has the complexity that we are supposed to, it's supposed to have. But we just use the simple lambda calculus without pattern matching or any other extension. I'm not really sure why now. I guess maybe, I don't know if pattern matching can be codified inside the ordinary lambda calculus or not. But we didn't really consider it actually. So no, not really.
Okay, well, thank you very much for answering my questions, and congratulations again on great work.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Hugo.
Yes.
Okay. So if you're done, Delia, are you okay? Ready?
Let me, yeah, thank you. Maico, so congratulations for your thesis. That's really a very nice work that I have followed during these 3 years. And I'm very happy that you are today defending your thesis. I have a couple of questions also. The first one is, so you explained that you design, you have typing systems to count exponential and multiplicative steps for all your versions of call by need, but not for call by value. So, so can you explain from an intuitive point of view why you are not able to count exponential steps for call by value?
Okay, so first of all, I think that in call by need, it is natural to talk about linear substitutions, or well, partial substitution, linear substitutions, because the fact that a variable is needed is not known a priori. So performing linear substitution is a natural fit for call by need evaluation strategies, but it's not so natural for call by value, where we first reduce the argument and then duplicate it anywhere it's needed, or if it's not needed even. And so in this sense, we define the strong call by value strategy as performing a meta-level substitution. So we have multiplicative steps appending explicit substitutions, but then we just, when we've reached the normal form of what's inside the explicit substitution, we just substitute it via a meta-level kind of substitution mechanism. And I think this is a more natural fit for call by value in particular, and this means that we don't have exponential steps, we don't count exponential steps, because we just perform them all at the same time. Yes, and that has consequences at the level of the type system as well. We have, instead of a linear substitution lemma, we have a substitution lemma, where we replace all the axioms with derivations for the lambda abstraction that is substituted, and so on. So bottom line would be that exponential steps are really meaningful in the call by need setting and not so much in the call by value setting. And that's why, well,
Okay, but if you imagine that you have a starting syntax where you have also explicit substitution, so that you can perform exponential steps without performing the corresponding multiplicative steps, then there is a sense, I mean, to count exponential steps, even if you perform them with the kind of operation that you are using.
Yes, the thing is that getting exact bounds in that case would involve perhaps, well, probably the tight constants. I mean, if you want to count exact steps, what is the problem here? The thing is that you know that in tight typings and split bounds, you count exponential steps for linear head reduction. And you do so by applying a technique where when you type a lambda abstraction, we have a premise where you type the body of the lambda abstraction and then you abstract from it. You just decrease the number of you decrease the results of the size index by the number of the cardinality of the multitype, and you add it to the exponential steps, right? Yeah. And I considered that technique for call by need, and as a matter of fact, it didn't work, because this technique only works, in my opinion, for strategies that duplicate in a silly fashion, because they just have to, in a sense, you substitute an identity, for example, or any lambda abstraction for a variable occurrence in an explicit substitution, and then this result may be copied in may lead to several other copies. And so in this sense, the slogan I use is that the linear head reduction, the technique you used for the type system, characterizing it and providing exact bounds for exponential steps, only works for evaluation strategies that don't share exponential steps, which is a kind of it's just a slogan, really. So it's not to be taken technically, but I think that it works for linear head. It may work for leftmost, outermost. It may work for other evaluation strategies, but it doesn't work for call by value, nor does it work for call by need. And yes, and this is connected with the fact.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
So I agree with. I agree with you in the sense that this technique does not work, but there are other ones. So
Yes.
that was my purpose, and in particular, I wanted to know if your difficulty was related to the strong property if your difficulty was related to your case study, which is strong call by value, or it is related to another issue. And I understand now that in fact the strong has nothing to do. I mean, the strong is anecdotic in the sense that yeah.
It's only
Okay,
because it's only because it's a call by value, and we define it with a meta-level substitution mechanism.
Yeah. But I insist that it could be interesting if you have a syntax with substitutions in which you don't start with a pure syntax and don't also counting exponential. It's different from counting multiplicative.
Yes.
So yeah, I will send you. Yeah.
Sorry, can I say something? So in the weak and closed call by value multi-type system, we do count exponential steps because we do perform substitutions linearly. We defined we adapted the weak and closed call by value strategy to this setting, to the linear substitution calculus and performing linear substitutions in order to relate it to call by need and call by name in terms of application and erasure.
Yes, but I remarked that you did it for the other frameworks, but my question was related to this case.
Yes.
Okay, understood. Another question is, so you know that there are other models for call by value which are not tight, but models of type intersection types, non-idempotent types, sorry, for call by value, in particular by Simona and co-authors. Do you have an idea of, can you compare with your model with that one? Do you have some comment about the possibility or the differences or the common points or something to say about that? So I'm thinking about her paper with Manzonetto, and I don't remember if there was a third author, the one which is published in a journal version, I think. Simona knows better than me, but which is different from your model. So can you comment about that?
So I can't really remember off the top of my mind the type system in Simona's paper. All I can remember, I'm not sure. I mean, I remember one of Simona's type systems where axioms were strict because we had linear types on the left, on the right. The inferred type, well, the right-hand side type was strict, and that's not the case in my type system. But all the other typing rules and all the other details, I can't really remember that. Of course, it's probably not defined for a linear substitution calculus version of call by value, so there's no notion of exponential steps.
That's true. It's for pure lambda calculus.
For the pure lambda
calculus. But if you take a version with explicit substitution, there is another one by Bucciarelli, Andres Viso, and me, and Rios, which is a FLOPS paper, which uses a type system which can be embedded in the one for call by push value. So
Right.
this
Yes.
in some sense answers to Damiano's question, in the sense that you can put, well, his question was with respect call by need, but if you take just call by name and call by value, you can look at the systems as instances of one more general one, which is the one for
call by
call by
push.
push value, which is in fact linear logic.
Uh-huh.
And this one is different from yours also, and it is and it has a possibility to count exponential steps.
Uh-huh.
Maybe you don't know this one. I will send you the
Yes, please, please do, because I don't really remember the type system like right now, but yes.
Okay, but because
I know about the
it will be
paper. Yes.
interesting to understand your point of view with respect to tight typing, because those works are done for upper bounds, but not for tight typing. And
Okay.
tight typing is much more difficult. So I would like to have your opinion about the possibility to adapt other models of call by value to the tight setting. That's my concrete question. Yeah.
In particular, for the call by push value type system.
I mean, for the one which is inspired, which can be embedded in call by push value.
Simona's one that can be embedded into the one for call by push
No,
value.
Simona's one cannot be embedded in call by push value. Mine can be embedded in call by push value. But my question applies to both of them. I mean, there are other models of call by value. And so what is your feeling about the extension of them to a tight setting? That's a concrete question.
Okay.
But if you don't have the systems in mind, so let's
yes,
change
unfortunately, I don't have them
okay,
in mind.
then there is no problem. So I have, maybe that's my yeah, maybe it's the last question. So I would like to know, this is another kind of question. So the notion of useful substitution, useful and useless substitution, is a very interesting technical tool, which is derived, or which was derived, as you said, from abstract machines. Okay.
Yes.
So I would like to know if you think that there is a more proof theoretical point of view about this kind of substitutions.
Proof theoretical. So, well, first of all, it's the notion of useful substitutions. Also, was inspired. Well, it is presented in the shape of an abstract machine, the useful Milner abstract machine by Benjamino, but also as a calculus. The outermost useful reduction. From a type theoretical point of, from a proof theoretical point of view, the useful substitutions, so substitutions in applied positions, not in the call by need setting, in a general setting.
In a general setting.
In a general setting.
Because this is a very important, this is a very key notion in all this work, and also in previous work by Benjamino, and I wonder if there is some more theoretical, more proof theoretical explanation of this kind of substitution.
Right. I haven't really considered it from a proof theoretical point of view. Of course, from a type theoretical and an operational point of view. But maybe I guess I was just too involved in the operational aspects of because originally, as I told Damiano, the original idea was to derive a useful strong call by need abstract machine, and so this is the starting point of the useful open call by need strategy. So it's the abstract machine. It was more of an operational understanding, or in implementation even understanding of applied positions, and but proof theoretically speaking, I'm not really sure what to answer, to be honest.
Okay. No,
it's an interesting question, definitely.
I wanted to know, because I think that it's a very key point, a very important point in this work, and I think that would be very interesting to find a pure theoretical explanation of
A
that.
unified framework for understanding this thing. Yes, definitely.
Okay, thank you very much, and
Thank you, Delia.
felicidades nuevamente.
Gracias, muchas gracias.
Okay, thank you, Delia. Della, we don't see you, but are you willing to ask questions?
Yes, I can. Let me ask a simple one. I'm not the expert here. And we've heard lots of technical material. And maybe the piano music is adding to the atmosphere. So I have a quick question. So Simona mentioned the semantics of call by need and call by name is probably the same in many models of semantics. Yes. So one way that you might try to separate them would be to consider adding to the lambda calculus some side effect operation, say a print statement. Would these two then separate? Call by need and call by
So
name?
with the side effect, I mean, also call by name. The thing is that what separates call by name from call by need is the duplication mechanism and not the erasure mechanism. And it's true that the models are, well, one model characterizes the other and vice versa because they are termination equivalent, call by name and call by need. But separating them, I remember once we considered studying them categorically and maybe separating them at the level of categorical semantics because they are indeed two different type systems. And but separating the models,
well, just their behavior when they're doing, you're just evaluating them.
Yes, of course.
Forget the typing, just a dynamic evaluation. Would they print the same, say, tokens? Would they be in the same order? Could they be in different orders? I'm just curious. I have no clue.
Yes, okay. So I guess since they are, of course, they are termination equivalent, and morally, so for example, in the weak and closed call by need strategy that I give, the evaluation context, we saw that I showed you that the evaluation contexts are morally the ones for call by name plus another one for jumping inside explicit substitutions, and this is only done to duplicate normal forms and not just any term like we would in call by name. So the idea is that probably they would be different in the sense that if we have if we have to reduce something, we would reduce it as many times as we need it in call by name, and in that sense it would be different. But in terms of models, I'm not really sure. Not really sure.
Okay, I mean, what I was asking was really not a semantic model. It was just a way of tracing operational semantics just by seeing what pops out on the screen if they have the same order. I mean, it's a vague question. So
yes, no, but it's an interesting one. I mean, it's the question of separating the models was really an interesting one at some point. Then I went on to derive the other type systems and evaluation strategies. But it is interesting to separate them because, after all, there are termination equivalent. The models, if they are adequate, then they both characterize each other, of course. But the subtleties between separating these two evaluation strategies, well, that is important to understand and to separate them. But,
okay. Well, yes. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. That was my only question.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Okay. Thanks. So Beniamino, do you want to ask or say something?
Well, I don't want to ask questions, but I think I know what the thesis is about. No, I'm happy that Maico finished that. I mean, despite the pandemic, despite getting the virus, despite a number of other things. And
with the added extension of 4 months, right?
Yes.
That went in my favor, I guess. Yeah.
And I think it went very well. The reports were good. The presentation, I would say, was very good. I'm happy. I'm sad for you because I think it would have been nice to be all in the same place so that you can enjoy some recognition of your work and everything. And while we have to do this back via Zoom, and
yes,
well, it's not the same. And also, you probably never meet anyone, the person involved again. So, well.
Yes, I mean, if the pandemic keeps going, yes, unfortunately, that will be the case.
But I mean, I'm happy of the happy ending. I'd like maybe to comment a little bit also over the questions that you received, and say also that, well, in a sense, I think Maico did I feel a bit guilty as an advisor because I gave you a topic that revealed to be very tough.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't expecting studying useful sharing Kolbe-Mead to be so tough, so technical. And I think you managed, despite everything, to finish the thing. So I'm very happy. Of course, I mean, probably the members of the jury, having looked at the manuscript and everything, may think that there's another way to do. We didn't get the right way. It's too complex, or maybe, as Damiano said, that one would have first understood the logical foundation and then derive the thing automatically. But we kind also, I mean, I also did my best to try to understand the setting together with you. Maybe I explored some of the things that were mentioned by myself. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure that there are many alternatives. Actually, I think that what is interesting in your work is also that you kind of got to the limits of what we can do. I mean, often we study very simple settings. As a single researchers, which study called by name, called by value, these tend to be relatively simple. When you start to put a number of techniques there, called by need, strong call, I mean, going under abstraction, useful sharing, various forms of sharing one to the other, things get just overwhelming. And it's in this sense, I'm sorry that you had to be overwhelmed by all those details.
It was definitely super interesting, but yes, it was challenging. Yes, sorry.
You managed to find a way out.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, I'm happy. Congratulations for
thank you.
Part.
Thank you, Benjamin. Yes. Yeah, so it was a challenging task. I mean, I remember working with Bruno and you on the abstract machine, and it was so involved, and but I like these things. So in a sense, I enjoyed it while I did it, and it is true that it was super complex at some point, and maybe there were other approaches to it, but the one we followed is probably, I mean, in my opinion, it's kind of the more natural way to go in defining the evaluation strategy, understanding what's going on there, and in the linear substitution calculus, because it's a calculus with the sharing mechanism and so on. It didn't seem so unnatural at the time, but now that we reached the end, we realize that it's really technical, and it also shows us the limits of the tools, as you just said. Maybe there are other approaches to it, and this also the moral of this thing is that well, some tools can get really technical, and one needs to find other better, simpler ways to understand useful sharing, for example.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I will come back to technical details, just last questions. So actually, my questions are quite related to what Delia said. So I think this would indeed be interesting to. So there are calculi like call by push value. So it's named as call by push value in the programming community, but it's very close to polarized logic or to focusing. So it's a kind of calculus highlighting the distinction between so logically positive and negative types, those who consume data and those who produce data, and calculi which led to introduce distinction between values and computation, for instance, which is something which cannot avoid when we do reduction semantics. At some time, we have a distinction between values and other terms. And yes, so I add to the question that I would be very interested to know from what you did, what can be translated into such calculus. In particular, I think it would connect to the question of Dell, who are asking about side effects, because this kind of calculus is designed so that you can quite smoothly add side effect in a lambda calculus. And also to the question of taking into account the inductive types, so which are on the. If you take lambda calculus, you have only negative types, only the implication. But if you put it in the context of of polarized logic, you also somehow for free you have the positive types, which includes the Booleans, the natural numbers, more generally the inductive types. Yes. So yes, Eduardo asked about constructors and pattern matching. So yes. I think all these questions suggest that what you did should extend somewhere to some extent.
Okay, so well, first of all, I wanted to say something about this distinction between values and computations. I wanted to say that in the open setting, for example, in open call by need, well, we don't have just values, but inner terms and abstractions, so two categories of normal forms. But the notion of the evaluation context is defined in terms of the needed variables. Of its needed variables is a mutually inductive definition. In particular, because we have to constantly, when we derive an evaluation context, we have to constantly keep understanding which parts are normalized, which parts of the term are normalized, so to speak, between quotes, quotations, and then which parts are not and need to be reduced still. So that notion in particular is very relevant to call by need, in particular in the open setting or the strong setting. At the level of types, well, of course, this has we use the type constants to separate these two notions between constructions that are supposed to be consumed, like variable occurrences or applications, and those which are not going to be consumed and will appear in the normal form. I just wanted to say all of this to tell you that it's I think it's a natural, this distinction between normal forms and computations that need to be carried out. I think they're a natural concept in at least in open call by need and its extensions. So yes, that's on one hand, and on the other hand, you said extending the calculi or the strategies with pattern matching and these other things, right? From the point of view of focusing.
No, what I mean is also is that once you go in such calculus, you necessarily have positive and negative types, and the positive types which are not present in the standard lambda calculus somehow come for free when you are in the polarized logic setting. It's you just have to add them and everything else works.
Okay. And you said that in linear logic we only have negative types. That's why.
No, in lambda calculus.
Lambda calculus. Okay. I'm not really sure what to answer, to be honest. I don't know how to connect these.
Okay.
These notions.
Okay.
Sorry. Yes.
So then, slightly related to the question of values. So the variables are not values in your setting?
Yes, that's right. This is the terminology Beniamino, for example, uses is theoretical and practical values.
Okay.
And there's a paper by him and Claudio Sacerdoti Cohen, I think, which is called On the Value of Variables, where they analyze why some formalisms take variables to be values and some others don't. In theoretical studies, variables are usually considered values, and in practical values, they are not considered values because of efficiency. It's a complexity. Actually, it's a reasonability reason. There's a reasonability reason behind it. And yes, and so I don't define variables to be values. That's right. And it's just a curiosity. But in the useful open call by need evaluation strategy, actually we extend I had to propose 3 categories of normal forms. So it's abstractions, inner terms, and variables. And actually, this was the turning point in the development of the strategy, because first we were trying to analyze everything in terms of abstractions and inner terms, and including variables in inner terms. And then I realized that, well, variables have their own properties, even at the level of types, of course, but also at the level of at the operational level. And as you can see in my manuscript, it is a natural thing to analyze variables separately from inner terms and from abstractions. So abstractions are the only thing that we duplicate. Of course, if we duplicate variables, we are duplicating inner terms. We would say that it's also an inner term, a variable. And in that sense, we lose reasonability, actually. So in open call by need, for example, we need to substitute lambda abstraction. So otherwise, we are unreasonable. And there's this size explosion problem. I don't know if you've ever heard the size explosion problem, where one can show that a family of terms normalizes in n steps, and the size of the result is exponential on n. And so in this sense, this is a counterexample to the reasonability of the calculus. And in the open setting, one needs to avoid substituting inner terms, including variables in particular. And so that's why we adopted only substitutions of lambda abstractions and not variables, which in any case, it's a natural, I think it's natural, it's a standard in call by need to only substitute lambda abstractions and not variables. But there's also the reasonability reason. I don't know if that answers your
Yes, okay.
question.
So I think it would be related, but then it's an observational rule that the semantic of your terms is stable by expansion of substitution of values.
The type abilities. Sorry, what do you mean?
Yes, no, I don't know if I can state it in your setting. So your system generate reduction theory. So
yes. Very writing system. Yes.
In this, if you take the closure of your reduction, and if you take this theory, is it stable by are two terms which differ by the expansion of the substitution in the same class of reduction? But maybe no, because
so
okay,
stable by substitution. Do you mean dropping the substitution?
I mean, beta v, is it beta v is beta v, the rule beta v of call by push value, of call by value? Sorry.
Yes.
A valid rule in the theory, validated by the theory.
So related to the previous question, I don't know if beta v, I think it substitutes variables. I'm not sure. Plotkin's call by value.
It's not restricted to a value. The argument is a value, is a lambda, let's say.
Yes. So it's stable. So if beta v is a valid rule in my setting, meaning that I would drop the idea of linear substitutions and I would always substitute lambda abstractions and variables. That's
Yes,
beta v, right?
okay, I believe no then.
So how does your question relate to implicit substitutions, for example,
No,
to the actual performing of the substitution, the meta level substitution, for example? Because I understand.
Yes, can an explicit substitution of lambda, where the term is a value in the sense of a lambda for you, can be turned into an implicit substitution?
Yes, the idea is that explicit substitutions can be all converted into an implicit substitution in the sense that we just perform the substitutions. And if two terms are equal, once we perform the substitutions, they remain equal. If that's what you mean.
No, but maybe I'm thinking about a context where which does not apply. Maybe what you're doing does not apply.
Okay.
And then another question I have is, when you do CPS translation of call by need, you have you need several steps of double negation, or rather, you need in the one I work at some time about, you have 5 levels of negation, so it's not a double but fifth negation.
Yeah.
To take into account that the flow of control of reduction is going from terms who need the variables to values to variables when they are not values and so on. Can you see something like that in what you're doing?
So you mean changing execution from one part of the term to the other? I mean this change of control?
Yes, so it's related to the question of abstract machine actually. So when you do abstract machine, how many times the controller would commute between the
environment,
the term and the substitution? Let's say,
yes, and the environment. Okay, so how this notion is related to my work? Well, I think that the key point here is the hereditary reduction that I showed that takes place in all of the call by need strategies. This hereditary reduction where we jump inside an explicit substitution, and which may continue like this and recursively just getting deeper and deeper inside explicit substitutions. This is in my in the formulation in the linear substitution calculus of weak and closed call by need, and from that point forward, the jump into the environment is always a key point, a key feature of the evaluation strategies for call by need at least, because in this way we first check that a variable is needed to continue reduction, and only then we jump inside the explicit substitution and reduce the term associated to it, and then we copy it. So this is the kind of change in control that you are talking about. Yes, and I think it's completely a natural feature of call by need. Of course, there are other formulations and so on, but at least in my definitions, it's completely natural. And actually, open call by need and useful open call by need also need to know when to jump inside the environment. And the environment being just a collection of explicit substitutions anyway, and this is related to the abstract machines. Actually, the split linear substitution calculus is a formulation that we came up with when we were studying a useful strong call by need abstract machine, or we wanted to reach that goal, but we didn't really. But this formalism preserves the idea that we perform hereditary reduction because we may jump into an explicit substitution that in the environment that leads us to jumping into another explicit substitution. And this is preserved while we change the shape of terms because we are no longer in the linear substitution calculus. We work up to this structural equivalence between proof nets that we talked with Deñamino about. But yes, the idea is that there is this change in control, jumping into the explicit substitutions and so on. And I think it's really key and central to call by need, at least in its linear substitution calculus formulation and also in the split linear substitution calculus. Because this implements the needed part and the wise application part of the strategy.
But I mean, for instance, Plotkin define semantics of call by name and call by value by CPS translation to some CPS target, let's say. Have you looked at this for call by need? Or?
No, not really. I didn't study it or consider it properly for call by need. But yes, I guess I had other goals in mind back at the time when I started. Yes. So okay. Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay, I think we asked a lot of questions.
Yes, it's okay. It's been fun.
I don't know. Is it Dale? Is it a tradition to ask? There is no audience really. Maybe 5 person, 6 person. I don't know if we ask. If some PhD in the audience want to ask a question.
I'm sure you can ask. You probably get no response.
Absolute silence. But anybody's welcome to ask if they want. But
okay.
Not, yeah.
So then, I don't know, Dale and Beniamino, you know what to do next?
Yes, I think now the jury should go to the link that they sent. Okay, we should all meet there.
And the rest,
Maico should hold this one open.
Okay, yes,
that's
right. I'll wait here.
We'll come back.
Okay.
See you in the other room.
See you later.
Okay.
Later. Matteo. Hey, Lutz. How are you guys? Hey, Giulio.
Yeah, now it's easy to meeting, right?
Oof, that was a long series of questions.
Yes, 2 hours.
No, they're always that long in France. I mean,
yeah, I remember Sonia's.
It was only 2 hours. That was short, right?
That was short? Okay. Because I finished...
Really?
I've seen things lasting 3 or 4 hours, right?
Oof.
Oh my God.
And now
that would have been painful.
Right? They write a report now and take another 2 hours.
Yeah. What's the usual time there? I mean, they usually take like hours to write the report?
And sometimes it's at least an hour probably. I mean, we have to... At
least an hour, wow. Okay.
Sometimes
so probably you can go and have lunch right now.
Have lunch, take a nap, wake up again and come back.
2 hours in the meeting now. I have to have other things to do. I just want to say hi.
Okay, yes. Well, thank you. How did you like the presentation? Was it clear?
Yeah, it was okay. I mean, it was at some point I just got lost, right? I mean, it's...
Yes,
Me too, but it was...
I mean, there are so many technical details, and it's... I mean, that's what some of the reviewers complained about. It's just like very technically involved, but it's hard to extract the key notions and concepts from all these case studies, you know. But
you did it great. Congrats.
Oh, thanks, Wally. How did you find it,
online somewhere?
Sorry, Matteo, what did you say?
No, just the thesis.
No. Bueno, los que están en YouTube ya saben que nos vemos en un ratito. Porque parece que Dale, que era el dueño de la llamada, se mandó a otra llamada y como que se cortó. Así que bueno. Hey.